A quiet airport terminal buzzing with tired travelers, the scent of coffee hanging in the air, and a flight boarding call echoing through the speakers. Now picture this: what if the passenger you thought was causing trouble, the one you kicked off the flight, turned out to be the owner of the airline itself? Stay with me until the end, because the twist in this story will freeze your heart and leave you stunned. And before we dive in, if you love true emotional stories with unexpected endings, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel Goodness Corner for more life-changing tales. It was an ordinary morning for Amelia, a young flight attendant known for her strong work ethic and warm smile. She had grown up with little, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. That background gave Amelia a natural empathy for passengers. She never looked down on anyone, no matter what they looked like or where they came from. But she was also strict about rules. After all, safety was her #1 priority in the air. She never hesitated to enforce the guidelines, even if it meant angering a passenger. Her co-workers admired her courage, though some whispered that she could be too serious at times. That day, Amelia was assigned to Flight 827 bound for New York City, a routine but fully booked flight. She brushed back her chestnut hair, straightened her crisp uniform, and plastered on a welcoming smile as boarding began. Most passengers shuffled in, weary but cooperative. Families, businessmen, students, each one was greeted with a polite nod or kind word. But then a tall man in a worn-out jacket and faded jeans entered. He looked nothing like the first-class elite usually boarding flights to New York. His sneakers were scuffed, his hair slightly messy, and he carried an old leather bag slung across his shoulder. Amelia's trained eyes quickly noted how he lingered around the boarding gate, almost as if testing the staff's patience before finally walking in. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" she asked, voice firm but courteous. The man handed it over silently, his sharp blue eyes observing her with an intensity that made her uneasy. His ticket was indeed for first class, though everything about his appearance screamed otherwise. Passengers behind him began to murmur, and Amelia felt a flicker of doubt. Something about him didn't fit. First-class tickets were rare for people dressed like this, and she knew from experience that imposters sometimes tried to sneak their way into higher seating. Still, rules were rules. She walked him to his seat, but her suspicion grew when she noticed how he casually sat down and crossed his legs like he owned the place. When she asked if he needed champagne or a menu, he shook his head. "No, thank you. I'm fine." That should have been the end of it, but when Amelia returned later, she noticed the man leaning over another passenger's magazine, asking questions about the flight schedule. That crossed a line in her mind. What kind of first-class passenger didn't know flight times or airline policies? She politely but firmly asked him to keep to himself, and the man nodded without protest. Yet she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Her instincts told her something was off. When the plane prepared for takeoff, Amelia spotted the man pulling out what looked like a worn notebook and jotting something down. To her anxious eyes, it seemed suspicious. She walked over. "Sir, is everything okay?" she asked. He looked up calmly. "Just taking notes," he said. But when she glanced at the page, she saw words like safety procedure, crew performance, and passenger behavior. Her chest tightened. Was he some kind of journalist planning to criticize the airline? Or worse, was he a fraud gathering intel for something shady? After a tense exchange, Amelia decided she couldn't risk it. "Sir, I'll need you to step off this flight," she said firmly. The cabin hushed. Passengers turned to look. The man raised an eyebrow but remained composed. "Step off the flight." "On what grounds?" Amelia stiffened. "For security reasons. You're making other passengers uncomfortable." A few nodded in agreement, though most just watched curiously. The man didn't argue. He simply picked up his old leather bag, gave Amelia one last unreadable look, and walked out without complaint. Amelia felt a mixture of relief and guilt, but she reminded herself she was doing her duty. Better safe than sorry. The plane took off without him, and soon the hum of engines filled the cabin as they soared above the clouds. Hours later, Amelia went about her duties as usual, though something gnawed at her chest. She replayed the moment over and over. Had she misjudged him? He hadn't resisted. He hadn't even raised his voice. He had simply left, as if he didn't need to prove anything. That calmness unsettled her more than anger would have. But Amelia brushed it off. She had a job to do. Yet fate wasn't finished with her. The next day, Amelia arrived at the airport again, ready for another shift. She was sipping coffee in the crew lounge when her supervisor suddenly called her in. "Amelia," he said gravely, "there's been a situation." She stiffened. "What kind of situation?" He handed her a printed report. Her eyes scanned the words, and her breath caught. It turned out the passenger she had removed, the one she thought was suspicious, was not only harmless but was none other than Alexander Grant, the billionaire owner of the very airline she worked for. Amelia's hands trembled. She had kicked her boss, the man who signed her paychecks, off his own plane. Her heart dropped to her stomach. Surely she would be fired. Panic surged in her chest. She had only been trying to protect the flight, but who would believe that? Billionaires had power, influence, and little patience for mistakes. Amelia's knees weakened, but her supervisor only sighed. "He hasn't said anything yet. He didn't even complain. But he's asked for you personally on his next flight. You're assigned as lead attendant." Amelia's world tilted. Why would he request her? Was he planning to confront her, humiliate her, maybe even destroy her career? The thought made her sick with dread, yet she had no choice. Orders were orders. 2 days later, Amelia found herself once again walking down the jet bridge to a private charter flight reserved exclusively for Alexander Grant. She adjusted her uniform, sweat prickling her palms. When she entered the cabin, her eyes locked instantly with his. He was seated casually in the front row, that same calm expression on his face, though this time he was dressed differently, an immaculate tailored suit, polished shoes, and a presence that radiated authority. This was no ordinary man pretending to fit in. This was a billionaire, powerful and intimidating. And yet, his piercing eyes held something Amelia hadn't expected: amusement. "Miss Amelia," he said smoothly, his voice deep but not unkind, "I believe we've met before." Her throat went dry. She swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. I'm so sorry about," but he lifted a hand, silencing her. "No apologies. You were doing your job. In fact, that's exactly why I wanted you here. You see, I was undercover that day. I wanted to see how my employees treated passengers, how strictly they enforced rules, and whether they had the courage to make difficult decisions." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze locking on hers. "And you, Amelia, you passed with flying colors." Her heart stopped. She had expected fury, humiliation, even punishment. But instead, he was praising her. She stared at him in disbelief, unable to process his words. I don't understand," she whispered. He smiled faintly. Most people would have ignored their instincts, afraid of confrontation, especially with someone sitting in first class. But you didn't. You stood by your duty. That takes courage. Amelia blinked rapidly, tears pricking her eyes. The weight of her fear lifted, replaced by a dizzying relief. She had risked everything, and somehow, it had earned his respect. And then came the words that would haunt her memory forever. Alexander leaned back, his tone suddenly sharper, more deliberate. "This is my flight," he said quietly. The sentence hit her like a thunderclap. In that moment, Amelia froze, the reality sinking in. She had kicked the billionaire owner of the airline off his own flight. And instead of ruining her, he had chosen to test her, to see her strength. The magnitude of it left her speechless, standing there with her heart pounding in her chest as if the floor beneath her had disappeared. Amelia's heart still raced as Alexander's words echoed, "This is my flight." Instead of anger, he offered her something she never expected, trust. "I need people like you in my company, fearless, honest, and loyal," he said. Tears welled in her eyes. She had only tried to protect others, yet that decision changed her life forever. Amelia realized sometimes standing firm, even in fear, leads to unexpected blessings. Alexander's respect gave her hope that kindness and courage truly mattered. Friends, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Goodness Corner for more inspiring tales.